I'm a forester and the land services manager, so I do all the private jobs, working with landowners, doing different kind of habitat management, deer management, forestry. We've got a full excavation team that I head up and schedule out, as well as managing all of our company lands. So a couple of big properties just like this one. This tract of land that sits in the township of Gordon is heavily cover typed by aspen. A lot of it was managed first when we bought the property 30 years ago or so. Kind of the cool thing about that is that, if I'm looking at it from a wildlife standpoint, I've kind of got a blank slate to work with as far as creating some habitat diversity, managing for different species with just that much acreage that's coming around for management in, say, the next 10 to 20 years. The opportunity that's out there is just creating that diversity, not just the opportunity to work with such a large amount of acreage, but also really that aspen's a big driver in the timber markets locally. You have an opportunity to generate quite a bit of revenue from that aspen, as well as manage for a bunch of different species of wildlife, such as ruffed grouse and deer, two of our big target species here in the Lake States. This property kind of sits in between two of the bigger mills, one in Hayward, one in Cloquet, that use up a lot of aspen. And so, and especially being on this ground, sandier soils, it's a drier soil type, year-round timber harvesting opportunity. So, we sit in kind of a nice little spot here for the local markets, and just for the all-weather access for the timber, which kind of makes it a higher value timber type. I would say the aspen is going to be the biggest driver out on this property. The oak can be, it's not as high quality as the aspen, but there's still a lot of logs and pulp that can be harvested from the property. Still at a pretty high value, especially with those log markets. A lot of the assets of this property come in, like I said, one, the timber that's going to be coming due here in the next 20 years. The other is the road infrastructure is well established and been maintained throughout the years. You can get just about within a 40 of just every piece of the property on a road system that's drivable. The ground is all-weather access. When we get rain events, it only takes a day or two before things are dry. So, and a lot of these roads have been maintained for logging equipment and logging trucks. So not only can you drive a pickup truck down them, but you can drive a semi-truck through a lot of this property. Very nice infrastructure on the property, as well as, good ground. This block in Gordon, there's probably 10% that could be harvested tomorrow if someone was to pick it up. And then there's probably another 30% that's coming due within the next 10 years. And really, that's, in the world of timber harvesting, pretty quick turnaround. From the time you decide you want to harvest a stand to the time when it's actually done could be 5 years. So, with that stuff that's coming due in the next 10 years, it's a pretty immediate turnaround. On this property, currently there is 645 acres of aspen cover type, 177 acres of northern hardwood, and then an additional 160 acres of oak cover type. And those are the big ones, especially for marketable timber. There's 19 acres of jack pine cover type, 9 acres of red pine, 17 acres of red pine plantation that's not natural, that's planted with red pine, 3 acres of white pine. There's 39 acres that's comprised in water, so lakes, ponds, marshes, 3 acres of upland brush. There's 2 acres of swamp hardwoods, 29 acres of swamp conifers, 10 acres of marsh, 57 acres of lowland grass, 36 acres of lowland brush, and 19 acres of wetlands. The conservation easement that we have on this property was purchased by the Wisconsin DNR. It states that this property will be together in perpetuity, as well as open for public access. The public has every right to be out here hunting, recreating on the property. Along with that, we also have it enrolled in MFL, the Managed Forest Law, which is a tax incentive program, which the two pair nicely together because, since it's open to the public already, through the conservation easement, the MFL program then also allows it to be open to the public at a reduced tax rate, which really, brings down some of the overhead for the ownership of this property. So that's really the biggest driver of the conservation easement is that open to public access. A couple other things with it is that, the property can't be parcelized, it stays together. We do have annual monitoring with the DNR that we do, so we sit down with the DNR, go over different practices that we've been doing, things that they'd like to see as far as timber management, recreational management on the property. That's also written in the conservation easement that we maintain the trail and road infrastructure out here, just to create that access for the public. They are not open for motorized transport, so the public can come in here and walk as much as they want, but we keep the gates closed just for the sake of it's easier to maintain all this stuff, this infrastructure, if there's not motorized access, and it keeps the property nice and quiet. The MFL program kind of meets all the requirements that we need to meet for the conservation easement, and it goes into much more detail with the MFL program. With that, you have a forester that you're working with through the DNR. You have a written management plan. For this property, if you're over 1,000 acres in that program, you're considered a large landowner. So it's not a really detailed management program. It has any particular management for each stand. Just kind of an overall encompassing plan for just forest management in general. There's monitoring done by the DNR to make sure that you're going along with the management required of the plan. With the tax incentives, you're getting all those, I would say, resources from the DNR through the MFL program to help with the management of this property. The continued management, sustainable, is what allows us to generate revenue from the property year after year. We're not only worried about what we're doing today, but we're looking at what happens 50 years from now. We're generating a stand that we can then come back to 50 years, 80 years, 100 years down the road. Trees are very good at taking care of themselves. The fun part, I would say, comes from the wildlife, creating wildlife habitat. There's also opportunity, recreational opportunity, hunting opportunity for the public and for ourselves, the owners. We're pretty avid users of the property as well. 98% of what we do is all natural regeneration. They are evolved to take care of themselves when a large disturbance occurs. They're very good at regenerating, reestablishing themselves. Aspen in particular, that this property has so much of, is very easy to manage because it regenerates so aggressively. Oak as well, especially in this sandier soil, is very aggressive, does a very good job at coming back all on its own. Aspen, it's about 40 years, and it sounds long to most people. It's still timber. It takes a while to grow, but there are guys during the ownership of our property have managed that first round of aspen, and now this stuff coming due, they'll have managed the aspen stand twice. Oak's a bit longer. Oak's probably an 80-year rotation, especially on these sandy soils, and that's actually pretty quick. It grows pretty aggressively and pretty quickly on the sandy soil. Aspen on this sandy soil can become over-mature very quickly. I mentioned the 40-year rotation age. I'd say somewhere around age 60, it can start getting a lot of rot internally. I've seen stands at age 40 or 50 that, they don't look like big trees, but the amount of the rot they incur can really detract from their value. The mills are set up to use smaller diameter wood in that aspen, and the oak can be saying relatively similar. Probably that 80-year rotation, if you let it go too much farther past that, you're going to start seeing some internal defect. There's a lot of wildlife species, especially some of the big hunting species around here, white-tailed deer and rough grouse, that really thrive on, one, diversity, and two, young forests, because that is a large part of their diet, is the browse and the buds that they find in those hardwood aspen stands that are under 20 years of age. The MFL program is really a great tax incentive program for both the landowner and the forest products industry. It gives a really nice tax break to the landowner, and it generates stumpage volume for the industry. The biggest thing is that when you're setting up these programs, you need to know what you're getting into. The DNR is very flexible, and they're happy to work with landowners as long as landowners are engaged, working with a professional forester and being active with their management, asking a lot of questions. Make sure there's that dialogue between the DNR forester, any professional forester that you're working with. Make sure you're communicating and being active with the management. From a value standpoint, to really get the top dollar out of your timber, it does take that active management. It doesn't take long, from a really nice log tree to be at its top dollar, or an aspen stand, and in a blink of an eye, all of a sudden 10 years can go by. You're not thinking about it because you have this nice resource, and these practices do take a long time. It can be years from making that decision to harvest to when the harvest is actually completed. You have to really stay active with a professional forester, probably every 3 to 5 years, having stuff reevaluated and reassessed, and acting early as opposed to later. Again, the diversity of the property is something that I think is overlooked a little bit, especially since we've been harvesting timber. There is that opportunity to keep harvesting timber. The properties really have a diversity of species and different products that can be harvested from the property, as well as how they're set up and how they kind of vary throughout the property allows that recreational and wildlife habitat opportunity to create such diversity. Really draw a lot of wildlife to the property. From a forester standpoint, kind of a fun property to work with.